So we are at the southern end of the Antietam battlefield. And here is the situation as the day is drawing to a close on the bloodiest day in American history. Down here on the southern part of the battlefield, the 9th Corps under Burnside has finally pushed across the Burnside Bridge under the divisional command of Sturgis. Sturgis's men are completely spent after 3 attempts to get across this bridge. So they are going to have to be replaced by Wilcox's division. Over here, you have another division under Rodman who has made a flanking march and has got in on the right side of the Army of Northern Virginia. So with Rodman on the left and with Wilcox on the right, these two divisions are going to make one final assault to try and outflank and crush the Army of Northern Virginia on their right flank. But they've got to do it quickly, because coming up from Harper's Ferry is a division under the command of A.P. Hill. I've moved up now from the Burnside Bridge area to the ridge line that the Confederates are going to be defending just to the east of Sharpsburg. So most of this video is probably going to be looking at things from the Confederate perspective. Now, if you look off here behind me, this is east. So you're going to have the Antietam Creek running like this, and then there are some of these ridges that run in between this ridge and the creek. One thing about Antietam or the Sharpsburg area, it is not flat. Okay, the map is flat, the ground is not. So whenever the 9th Corps, you're going to have Rodman coming up over here. You're going to have Wilcox moving up through this area here. As they are moving to the west, there are these giant speed bumps that they are having to go across, which is giving the Confederates time while A.P. Hill is coming up from Harper's Ferry. Now again, this is looking to the east towards Antietam Creek. And if we shift our focus here to the north, well, right across here is where Wilcox's division is going to make its attack from right to left. Skirmishers in one of those brigades was the 79th New York. They were called the Highland Brigade. They were Scotsmen, and early in the war, they actually wore kilts into battle. But anyway, they talked about how withering and how awful the artillery fire was right here in this area as they are making their way across. As a matter of fact, one of them said, later on, the colonel reported, he said, for 30 minutes we were under a most severe fire of round shot, shell, grape, and canister, and suffered severely. So these men who are coming up in this position are just getting chewed up as they are making their way across this rough ground. Before we move on to the next spot, there's a map here on this wayside marker that really helps us to orient ourselves as to where we are. So as we already mentioned, you have Sturgis's division who has crossed the lower bridge, but they are spent. So you're going to have Wilcox's division who's going to come online to replace them. They are pushing up on the right here against David Rumpf Jones, and Rodman has made this flanking march, has crossed here at Snavely Ford, is going to turn left, and he is going to be attacking on the left flank. And also coming in from Harper's Ferry, you've got A.P. Hill. And here's a picture of Rodman. So we're going to move over here now to where Rodman's assault took place. The road that I'm walking down right now in 1862 would have been a farm lane with a stone fence right along the side of it. And where I was standing just a moment ago was probably, I don't know, maybe quarter mile, half mile off in this direction on the other side of this hill. Manning this line, you would have had Toombs Brigade, and then right around here you would have had Archer's Brigade. And as Rodman's men and his division were coming up from this direction, well, A.P. Hill was going to show up. And leading A.P. Hill's division was a South Carolina regiment under the leadership of a guy by the name of Gregg. Last name is Gregg. And they are going to hit what was called the 40-acre cornfield right here in this corner. The part of the battlefield that we are looking at right now is called the 40-acre cornfield, although right now it's the 40-acre soybean field. And again, we're looking off to the east, and coming up from this direction in Rodman's division, on our left you would have had the 16th Connecticut, and just to our right would be the 4th Rhode Island, and they're making their way up through here, kind of at an angle a little bit. And right over here in this corner, you are going to have the 12th South Carolina, the 1st South Carolina, and the 1st South Carolina Rifles that are going to arrive from right in here. And they are just going to blast right into these guys. And of course, you've got tall corn, so there's a lot of confusion. So these two regiments are going to end up being driven back. But off to our left here, well, there are some Ohio regiments that are making their way towards this Confederate line. So after the South Carolina troops kind of cleaned out the 16th Connecticut and the 4th Rhode Island in the 40-acre cornfield, they start working their way in this direction. You've got Archer's Brigade over here. He was part of A.P. Hill's division. And right here we have a monument to the 30th Ohio. The 30th Ohio was part of Ewing's brigade, and they had crossed over this stone wall and didn't know that these South Carolina troops were coming up on him. And anyway, all of these Ohio regiments are going to end up collapsing and falling back across the stone wall. As we are standing here, you can probably just imagine the fighting that is taking place back and forth across this farm lane. So you would have had South Carolina troops who were advancing in this direction. You would have had Archer's Confederates coming in from left to right and pushing like the 30th Ohio off to the right back towards the stone wall that would have been here. And you have to know that these guys who had just been fighting and marching and were just wore out were probably praying for dark so that this could all end. And there's a particularly sad story among the 30th Ohio. There were two color bearers. One of them was a guy by the name of Sergeant Nathan White, and he was carrying the national flag. Well, as he is up here on the stone wall, not this exact stone wall, there would have been a different one at the time, he plants it defiantly in the face of these Confederates who are moving in on them, and he ended up getting shot right in the chest. Probably the more tragic story was that of the regimental color bearer, William Carter. So Carter had enlisted to fight with the Union in 1861, and before he enlisted, his mother had become a widow. His mother's name was Hannah, and had been left virtually penniless whenever her husband David had died. So William was making a habit of sending almost all of his money back to his mother so that he could support her. Well, right here along the wall that would have been along this farm lane, Carter was going to take a bullet right to the head and instantly be killed. Now you know that had to just be tragic news for his mother. What made the news even more tragic is that earlier that year at Shiloh, she had lost her other two sons. So within a 6-month period, all of her sons were gone. If you ever have a chance to go to Gettysburg and go to the field of Pickett's Charge, they have a spot there that's known as the high water marks. This is the high water mark of the Army of Northern Virginia on the fields of Gettysburg. Well, Antietam has a high water mark as well. Except for here, it was the high water mark of the Union. Going up to the spot where the Union got the closest that they ever did to Sharpsburg on the 17th of September. Well, as you can see, we've got ourselves a big monument that essentially marks the high water mark for the Union here at Antietam. Now, around this area, you would have had like Virginians from Kemper's brigade, and you also would have had a brigade under Drayton. These would have been in the divisional command of D.R. Jones. And coming up on this position, let me just move around here, would have been a brigade in Rodman's division under the command of a guy named Fairchild. And that would have been the 9th, the 103rd, and the 89th New York. Up here by the monument, they have this artist depiction of the high point of the Union attack. And there was a guy in the 17th Virginia who described the scene as these New Yorkers were making their way up the hill. He said first, you could look out and just over the rise you could see like the glint of an eagle, and then you could see the colors unfurl, and then you would see a hat, and then you would see a face, and these Union New Yorkers are getting closer and closer, and whenever they got about 60 yards from here, well, the Virginia guys over here manning this part of the line cut loose on them, and there was just this deadly volley hurled towards the New Yorkers. Now, the line here ended up faltering, and the Virginians ended up falling back, but they were able to reform and take the line, and Fairchild's men ended up falling back another 250 yards. And if you look here, well, this is what is called a mortuary cannon. In the midst of all of this fighting that took place here, nobody saw it happen, but somewhere the division commander, Isaac Rodman, is going to get hit, and he is going to be mortally wounded here. It says that he was hit 265 yards south of this point, so that would be off in this direction. So Isaac Rodman is going to be the 5th of 6 generals who are killed or mortally wounded here at Antietam. Here near the 40-acre cornfield, the light was finally starting to fade, and the day's fighting was pretty much over. And as things had kind of quieted down, a guy by the name of General Branch, who was under A.P. Hill's command, came up to this very spot right here. And as you can see, there's a mortuary cannon, so you know what's coming. He comes up to this spot to converse. I've seen or heard different stories. One is that he is conversing with Toombs and Archer, and they're kind of discussing the line here along this farm lane. And in one of the last shots that is fired in the Battle of Antietam, well, Branch is going to be the one who gets hit. But that was going to bring an end to the bloodiest day in American history. This was going to kind of go down as a draw. Both sides would just kind of square off against each other for the next few days. Eventually Lee is going to fade back. He's going to go across the Potomac River and go back into Virginia. And while it's not a solid win for the Union, it's enough to where Lincoln is able to issue the Emancipation Proclamation. But that concluded the Battle of Antietam.